You know that feeling, right? When you suddenly realize you've been kind of gently pushed towards something, maybe buying a certain thing or just going along with a friend's idea.
Oh yeah, influence.
Yeah,
Literally everywhere.
it really is.
Yeah.
And often in ways we don't even notice. Like, think about product placement online, or that one friend who always gets their way, or just those little nudges that somehow work.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And sometimes, yeah, a bit unsettling. Today, we're going to dive into those undercurrents, looking at what people often call dark psychology.
Okay, dark psychology sounds a bit, well, dramatic. But from what we've seen in the sources, it's maybe less about pure evil and more about understanding how human behavior works,
Yeah.
especially the parts that can sway people, sometimes without them even knowing.
Exactly. It's like knowing the levers or the buttons to push in social
Right,
situations.
the sort of cheat codes for interaction.
Precisely. And the thing is, these darker methods, they're not some totally separate thing. They're actually rooted in basic human psychology, how we think, what drives us, our emotions. It's just applying that knowledge with a real focus on influence.
Gotcha. And a big part of this seems to be the dark triad. That term pops up a lot. What exactly are these three traits?
Okay, so the dark triad, it's basically three personality traits that often cluster together: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
Right.
So, narcissism first. We're not just talking about vanity here, like loving selfies. It's more about this inflated sense of self-importance, a really deep need for admiration from others, often difficult relationships, and crucially, a lack of empathy.
So it's like a profound self-centeredness,
Hmm.
but maybe masking a kind of fragile ego that needs constant propping up.
That's a great way to put it. Constantly needs that external validation. Then you've got Machiavellianism. These are the planners, the strategic thinkers, often very focused on their own self-interest. The sort of background question for them is often, how does this benefit me? And how do I manage how people see me so I win?
Huh. Sounds like they're playing a different game almost.
Yeah.
Very calculated.
Yeah, very pragmatic. Like life's a game of strategy.
Thinking steps ahead, managing their image, making
Yeah.
sure they look good, even while, pursuing their own goals.
That's the core of it.
Mm.
And finally, there's psychopathy. Now, this one has heavy connotations, obviously.
Yeah.
But in this context, we're looking at traits like a real lack of empathy and remorse, maybe impulsivity, sometimes superficial charm.
Okay.
And interestingly, some of our sources point out that, people scoring higher on these traits are maybe not as rare as you'd think in, say, high-level corporate roles.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
But I guess I can sort of see how being detached from emotions might seem like an advantage for making really tough calls.
Well, that's the idea. Some researchers explore this lack of compassionate indecision, as they put it. It can help people climb in competitive places.
But there's a cost.
Exactly. There's a growing understanding that it often comes at a significant cost to others, and maybe the organization or society as a whole.
So the dark part isn't necessarily about being a movie villain. It's more about understanding these fundamental, maybe uncomfortable parts of human nature and how they get used in interactions.
Right. And the sources really stress this. These aren't inherently evil skills, they're tools. Like
Yeah.
a hammer, you can build something or you can break something.
The intent matters.
Absolutely. Understanding the principles is just knowledge. How you use it is what counts.
And it's not just about spotting when someone else might be trying to manipulate us, is it?
Yeah.
It's also about, looking inward, understanding our own weak spots.
Yes, definitely. Self-awareness is maybe the best defense. If you understand these concepts, you start noticing the subtle stuff more. You're better equipped to choose how you respond, consciously.
Makes sense. Psychology, really, it touches everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How our brains work, relationships, work life. It's so much broader than just, therapy.
Oh, absolutely. Social psychology, cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, they all give us ways to understand why we do what we do. And looking at these darker angles just adds another layer, another lens, maybe less comfortable, but important.
Okay. So our mission for this deep dive, then, is to really get to grips with these core ideas, the basic psych foundations, the dark triad, and then how these actually translate into, influencing people in the real world.
Sounds like a plan.
Let's start with those foundations. It seems like you really need a good handle on general psychology to be effective at influencing others, whether your intentions are good or bad.
That's a key insight from the sources. People who are good at influence, they tend to have this strong grasp, maybe intuitive, maybe learn of how people tick, motivations, emotional triggers, how we process things.
One of the methods mentioned is introspection, just looking inward at your own thoughts and feelings. How does that help understand influencing others?
Well, introspection gives you direct access to, well, the human experience, right?
Yeah.
Your own. By examining your own reactions, feelings, motives, you build a better model of how minds work generally. You see universal patterns in yourself first.
Ah, okay. So you tune your own instrument, basically, to better read the signals from others.
Something like that, yeah. It helps you anticipate how others might think or feel.
Got it. Okay, let's dive into the dark triad more deeply. We know the names, but what's the strategic thinking behind each? Starting with Machiavellianism, it really seems to come down to calculated self-interest.
It does. The core thinking seems to be twofold. What's in it for me, tangibly? And just as important, how will this look to others, and how can I spin that perception to my advantage?
Masters of reputation management, almost.
Definitely. Strategic reputation management, all serving their own goals.
And they can be really good at acting in their own interest while seeming completely charming and likable. That feels like a potent mix for getting people on their side, maybe deceptively.
Exactly. That ability to project warmth and goodwill while quietly pushing their own agenda, that's a hallmark. They understand trust can be a tool.
Okay. Moving to psychopathy.
Yeah.
We mentioned its presence in leadership. What are the key psychological bits relevant here?
The main things in this context are a real deficit in empathy, like finding it hard to understand or share others' feelings, and often a lack of guilt or remorse about their actions.
That emotional detachment.
Right. It can allow for a more, you could say, ruthless pursuit of goals. It's like having emotional insulation that blocks the usual pangs of conscience.
So in cutthroat environments, that detachment might even be seen as an asset, right? Even if it's ethically dubious.
Potentially, yeah. It might help someone succeed in certain ways, but as we said, the costs to others and the system are increasingly recognized.
And narcissism, you said, is more than just self-love. What's the core driver there?
The absolute driving need for admiration, validation from outside. It often covers up deep insecurities and a really fragile sense of self.
Ah, so that need dictates their behavior.
A lot of it, yeah. They need people around them who mirror back that inflated self-image they're trying to maintain. Manipulating situations to ensure they look good becomes crucial.
That makes total sense. Okay, let's shift to the actual tactics, the nuts and bolts of influence and manipulation that use these traits. Sources list quite a few. Reciprocity feels fundamental, that need to return a favor.
It's incredibly powerful because it's so deeply wired into us socially. You do something for someone, even small, and it creates this little psychological IOU, a feeling of obligation.
Which can be cashed in later.
Subtly, yeah.
Yeah.
It taps into our desire for fairness.
Like planting a seed of debt. Okay, another tactic. Exploiting exhaustion. Making requests when someone's just mentally drained, that feels pretty low.
Well, it's effective because when you're tired, your cognitive defenses are down. You can't evaluate things as critically. You're just more likely to agree to get it over with, conserve energy.
Makes sense. Then there's focusing on the gains first and only mentioning the costs later. Classic sales trick, but yeah, darker uses too.
Oh, absolutely. You build up all the positives, get someone excited. By the time the downside or the price comes up, it seems smaller compared to the value you've already built up in their mind.
Anchoring it on the good stuff first.
Precisely.
What about nonverbal stuff? Facial expressions seem huge for trust. That finding about a little eyebrow raise and a small smile being most credible, that's specific.
It is, and the key is the subtlety. These aren't big, obvious gestures. They're micro-expressions we pick up on, often unconsciously, that affect our gut feeling about someone.
So tiny cues matter a lot.
They really do. And it's not just smiles. Lips, too. Pursed lips suggesting distrust. Lip biting for stress. Covering the mouth, hiding something. Even the tiny up or down turn of the corners.
Hope or sadness.
Yeah.
We miss so much if we're not paying attention.
We do. Learning to read these can give you a much better sense of someone's real emotional state, which might not match their words.
Okay, mind control. Sounds very sci-fi. But the sources talk about it in terms of everyday things, like ads, product placement, persuasive friends, less dramatic brainwashing, more subtle shaping.
That's a really important distinction. In daily life, it's often these background influences slowly molding our tastes, beliefs, choices, often without us realizing it's happening.
Then there's re-education. More direct, maybe controversial, using repetition to change beliefs. The idea that hearing something enough makes you accept it.
Yeah, repetition is powerful. It can wear down critical thinking over time. Constant exposure can kind of groove new pathways in the brain, making the repeated message feel more familiar, more true.
And specific coercive tactics are mentioned too, like thinking for someone by limiting their options using seemingly flawless logic, creating fake urgency, hammering home the importance of this one path.
It's all about reducing their mental wiggle room, isn't it? Controlling the information, applying pressure, pushing them towards the outcome you want.
Who actually uses these tactics? Media producers, obviously, with visuals, maybe even subliminal stuff. That example of flashed images in old campaigns is chilling.
Visuals are incredibly potent. Subliminal cues can sneak past our conscious filters and hit emotional triggers directly.
And the old divide and conquer strategy. You see it everywhere: sports, politics, religion, keeping groups fractured to maintain control.
It's timeless, unfortunately. Fomenting division, creating an us versus them, weakens any challenge to authority.
The sources also bring up psychiatry and medication as a form of mind control. That's a really contentious point, raising concerns about dependency, especially with kids.
Yeah, that's a very complex and debated area. It touches on big questions about agency, treatment, and the potential for medication to affect how people think and feel. Diverse views there, for sure.
Okay, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP, presented as tools for self-improvement, but also for influence in business marketing. The idea is we can consciously change our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, language.
NLP focuses heavily on that link between internal states and external actions. Understanding that link gives you more control, potentially over yourself.
And potentially over others.
Well, yeah. The sources mention things like language imitation, subtly mirroring how someone talks to build rapport, then using that connection to guide them.
Creating a psychological echo makes them feel understood, then more open to suggestion.
Exactly. It lowers defenses subconsciously.
One thing the sources really hammer home is how common subtle manipulation is. Sales, puppy dog eyes, charming and upgrade. We often miss it because we're just not looking for it.
That's a huge point. Because it flies under the radar, it can be really effective at shaping our choices without setting off alarm bells.
There's also a difference highlighted between just persuading someone changing their mind and actually getting them to do something.
Yeah.
That often takes an extra manipulative nudge.
Right. Changing a belief is one thing. Translating that belief into action, that often requires more direct prompting or manipulating the situation to make the desired action easier or seem necessary.
Okay, the manipulative personality. Projecting confidence and positivity seems key. But then there's the darker side. Acting totally convinced even when they're not. Undermining people's self-esteem, belittling, ridicule, turning arguments around. It paints a pretty toxic picture.
These are definitely power play tactics, all aimed at establishing dominance, making the other person feel small and therefore easier to control.
And indirect stuff too, like delaying responses, the silent treatment, passive-aggressive control.
Very effective. Creates anxiety, makes the target desperate to please the manipulator just to break the tension.
And then direct intimidation, aggressive body language, invading personal space.
Yeah, overt power displays, making you feel uncomfortable, vulnerable, more likely to just give in.
Crucially, the sources say this isn't about gender. Anyone can be manipulative.
Absolutely vital point. It's about personality and motives, not stereotypes.
Coercion tactics are described in 2 steps. Peace, matching their state, building rapport. Then fear, implying something bad will happen if they don't comply. Build trust, then threaten.
Leverages that initial connection to make the threat hit harder, lowers defenses, then applies pressure.
And this stuff creeps into unexpected places, like churches, where flattery might be used to push an agenda. Kindness as a disguise.
Yeah, even positive actions can be used strategically to manipulate group dynamics for personal gain.
Politics, too. Subtle public shaming, promises or threats with implied follow-up, all to get people to vote. Leveraging social pressure.
Taps into our need for social approval and the feeling that our actions are being watched.
Hypnosis gets demystified a bit. Not magic, just a natural altered state, heightened suggestibility, because your usual critical thinking is kind of bypassed.
Exactly. It's just a focused state of attention where the conscious mind is less guarded. Happens naturally all the time, like when you're engrossed in a movie.
Brainwashing is described as much more extreme, creating really rigid mental pathways, making it super hard for someone to think differently, basically rewriting their core beliefs.
Yeah, it's a systematic, often coercive process, dismantling old beliefs, installing new rigid ones, very difficult to break free from.
So, how do you prevent manipulation? The sources say it often exploits power imbalances, disguises the manipulator's goal as the victim's, and offers fake help to gain control. Recognizing those patterns seems key.
Understanding that underlying dynamic, the manipulator exploiting vulnerability for control, is the first step in defending yourself.
And getting away from a manipulator is hard because they're slippery, right? Always changing things, breaking promises, keeps you constantly off balance.
That inconsistency is a tactic itself. It prevents you from getting stable footing to push back.
Here's a weird one. Ignoring passive-aggressive people might actually make them more productive.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive. The idea is maybe by not engaging with their indirect tactics, you force them to channel that energy into more direct, constructive action. Maybe.
Interesting. The sources also suggest thinking about dark psychology not as some fringe thing, but as part of being human. A potential in everyone, even if good people choose not to act on it. That capacity to harm without cause.
It reframes it as part of the human condition. We all have these potentials, but our choices and morals dictate our actions.
And confronting your own dark side is important, but only after cultivating self-compassion. Matry, the sources call it, can't face what you judge too harshly in yourself.
Exactly. Self-compassion allows for honest reflection without being crippled by guilt or shame, which just block understanding.
The dark triad traits at work link to harmful behavior without remorse. We need to ask ourselves if we're accidentally encouraging those traits in ourselves or workplaces.
Self-awareness includes looking at the systems we're part of. Are we rewarding Machiavellianism or narcissism, even unintentionally?
The art of manipulation gets redefined too. Not forcing someone, but getting them to want to do what you want. Much subtler.
Highlights the sophistication, right? Aligning your goal with their motivation so they feel it's their own choice.
Like the boulder rolling downhill analogy, work with natural tendencies. Don't force things against the grain.
Understanding someone's existing beliefs and drives makes persuasion much smoother. Go with the flow.
How to check if you're delusional. 2 tests. Misprioritizing things and setting wrong expectations for others. Ground yourself in reality. Know people's limits.
Good reality checks. Are my perceptions matching the actual situation and people involved?
Dealing with toxic people. Don't project your empathy onto them and don't own their projections. Maintain your boundaries.
Crucial for self-protection. Don't let them exploit your good nature or dump their issues onto you.
Going matrix on manipulators, actively reframing their reality using tact, cunning, rhetoric. Think about content, tone, emotion, logic. The fixer-upper analogy was good for that.
It's about taking control of the narrative, shaping how to see the situation, turning negatives into positives with smart communication.
Freud's unconscious mind comes up holding painful stuff outside awareness, but still influencing us. Dreams as a window, maybe.
Yeah, the idea that powerful forces operate beneath the surface of our conscious awareness is pretty fundamental in psychology.
That story about the friend whose religious beliefs were attacked shows how manipulators dig deep for vulnerabilities, the things that really matter to you.
They target core values because that gives them the most leverage.
And the freezing stage of mind control. After unfreezing old beliefs, they lock in the new ones, forcing the victim to choose the manipulator's principles, solidifying the new worldview.
Making the manipulated beliefs stick, making them resistant to change later, anchoring the new perspective.
For this deep dive, we're really focusing on the everyday stuff. Manipulation and deception.
Right, the tactics you're most likely to run into day to day.
That Richard Bandler quote really hits home. Brains aren't designed to get results. They go in directions. If you know how the brain works, you can set your directions. If you don't, then someone else will.
Wow. It really underscores the power of self-awareness and psychological literacy if you don't steer your own mind.
Someone else might. Okay, hypnosis again. Demystified as just an altered state, a trance we slip into daily. Nothing spooky.
Yeah, recognizing altered states are common, helps understand how suggestibility fluctuates naturally.
The stages. Attention absorption, getting lost in something, bypassing the critical faculty, conscious mind chills, unconscious opens up like the purple flying turtle. Then confusion or pattern interrupt. Disrupting thoughts creates a brief hypnotic state open to suggestion.
Shows how focus, critical thinking, and patterns can be guided to make someone more suggestible.
Persuasion seems different, though. The person still makes choices, but their will kind of aligns with the persuaders. Graduality is key, small steps first. The gentle nudge.
The power is in the small steps. Each yes makes the next one easier, leading them further than they might have gone initially.
And state matching and leading. Mirror their mood to connect, then subtly shift your mood to guide theirs towards compliance. That hook point.
Build rapport first through mirroring, then gently lead their emotional state to where you want it. Increases receptivity.
Being able to analyze people has real benefits, doesn't it? At work, understanding colleagues, spotting dishonesty in arguments, seeing escalation coming, and just understanding yourself better by looking at your own body language.
Definitely boosts social intelligence, better communication, conflict management, self-awareness.
And building trust often starts just by letting the other person talk first. Shows you value their view.
Simple but effective. Makes people feel heard, which is foundational for rapport.
The difference between sensation, raw input, and perception, our interpretation, is important too. We adapt to constant stuff, and our interpretation is always subjective.
Reminds us our reality is constructed, not just received, and therefore it can be influenced.
Learning and behavior, we have innate reflexes, but so much is learned through conditioning or watching others. Experience shapes us.
Understanding how we learn helps understand how behaviors form and change.
And intelligence isn't fixed. The sources say cognitive training helps puzzles, new skills, writing, even Tetris. Brains can grow.
Highlights neuroplasticity. We can keep learning and improving cognitively.
Consciousness, our awareness of everything, thoughts, feelings, surroundings, it's always changing, fluid.
Right. Our mental state isn't static. It can be influenced by lots of things.
Good leadership often involves recognizing effort and helping people save face, builds loyalty.
Valuing people, especially when things go wrong, builds strong teams.
Motivating people at work when they're not feeling it. Reframing tasks to show their importance can help create new motivation.
Connecting work to values or impact can really boost engagement.
Mastering persuasion involves repetition, cuts through noise. Sincere praise makes people receptive. And storytelling connects emotionally, conveys perspective.
Fundamental techniques. Repetition for memory, praise for positivity, stories for connection. They work.
That frozen face cue indicating intense fear, even if words deny it. Body language tells tales.
Facial expressions can betray hidden emotions. Lack of movement can signal strong suppression.
Personal space, intimate personal social zones. Invading that space feels wrong, aggressive, territoriality.
Respecting those unspoken boundaries is key for comfort. Violations are jarring.
But context matters,
Yeah.
right? Medical needs, communication issues might change things. Can't make rigid rules.
Exactly. Always consider the situation and individual circumstances.
Vulnerability to manipulation, emotional dependency, getting lost in abstract thought, over-intellectualization, and the dark triad traits, again, self-interest, low empathy, often linked to those who exploit others.
Recognizing these vulnerabilities in ourselves and others helps build resilience.
We see dark psychology examples everywhere. Manipulation as an art, speakers using emotion for sales, leaders using tactics for compliance, sales using persuasion, and maybe deception. It's widespread.
Shows how these principles play out across many areas of life.
Subtle nudges, too. Eye images making people more ethical, changing the environment to reduce selfishness, making things slightly complicated to cause confusion and compliance. Clever.
Tapping into subconscious triggers and biases without direct commands. Subtle but effective.
Protecting yourself in relationships. Self-reflection on past future, setting clear boundaries, knowing why you have those boundaries, prevents being controlled.
Strong sense of self plus clear boundaries, healthier relationships, less room for manipulation.
Speed reading people, advanced observation, trusting intuition, checking for inconsistencies, comparing behavior to their baseline over time and in different contexts, being a behavioral detective.
Hones your ability to see beyond the surface, understand true intentions and feelings.
Emotional intelligence, EQ. Briefly, it's about identifying emotions, yours and others, using feelings to guide thought, understanding emotional shifts, making informed choices. We'll dig into this more.
EQ is critical. It governs how we handle ourselves and our relationships.
Boosting EQ involves a lot. Managing caffeine, sleep, controlling anger, reflection, self-awareness, pushing comfort zones, knowing triggers, letting emotions pass, avoiding decisions when moody, checking values, reading body language, active listening, being present, knowing the EQ health link, stress relief, optimism, empathy, listening to your body. It's holistic.
Yeah, it's a whole range of skills and practices. Developing them gives you so much more understanding and control over your emotional world and interactions.
Empathy gets a deep dive. Lack of it linked to societal issues. Differentiating cognitive understanding, emotional feeling with, and compassionate acting. Improving it involves listening quietly, self-reflection, testing instincts, challenging assumptions, getting feedback, exploring emotions, perspective-taking, curiosity.
Empathy is fundamental. Building it in all its forms leads to better connections, stronger relationships, a more compassionate world.
Social skills, part of EQ, means handling and influencing others' emotions effectively. navigating interactions smoothly.
Strong social skills mean better rapport, communication, and outcomes in social situations.
Emotional drain, feeling hopeless is a key sign. Self-soothing helps, like daily feeling check-ins. Focusing on wins builds resilience.
Self-care and coping strategies are essential for avoiding burnout and maintaining well-being.
Gaslighting, nasty tactic, often used by narcissists. Distorting reality, playing on fears, and the desire to be understood. The gaslighter often believes their own version because it meets their need for power. Victims' self-doubt makes them vulnerable.
It's incredibly damaging. It chips away at your sense of reality, your trust in yourself. Devastating.
Boundaries are personal, are right. Enforcing them is defending that right. Nobody dictates your feelings or limits.
Absolutely. Setting and holding boundaries protects your emotional health.
Hijacking conversations, manipulators steering away from accountability back to their own needs, often subconscious.
Allows them to dodge responsibility and keep control by keeping the focus on themselves.
That Jolly and Pennywork example really shows gaslighting, discrediting someone, making them doubt their competence.
Provides a concrete picture of how it works in practice. Confusion, inadequacy, questioning sanity.
Other gaslighting moves. Spreading rumors, blaming the victim for the manipulator's actions, all about shifting blame, creating doubt.
Further erodes the victim's confidence and judgment.
Cognitive dissonance, that discomfort from conflicting beliefs. We try to reduce it, sometimes by changing beliefs to match actions, even bad ones.
Helps explain why people might rationalize manipulation or distort reality to feel consistent.
The negative effects of manipulation are serious. Immediate distress, long-term mental health damage.
The impact can be really profound, affecting self-esteem, trust, overall well-being for a long time.
Narcissists, self-important, fragile egos, textbook manipulators, unhappy without constant admiration, often have damaging relationships.
Their core traits, grandiosity, need for admiration, lack of empathy, fuel the manipulation they use to prop up their ego and control others.
Gaslighting's main effect: the victim doubts reality. Constant denial makes you question your own perception.
That erosion of self-trust is central and incredibly harmful.
The sources list 28 signs you might be being gaslighted, a really useful checklist.
Offers concrete things to look out for in your own relationships.
Narcissists target those who question them threats. Victims in close relationships often learn to just agree to keep the peace.
Shows how they maintain control, devalue challengers, train dependence.
Healing from manipulation gaslighting. Forgive yourself for not seeing it, for being vulnerable. Make a safety plan if you need to leave. Don't excuse the abuser's behavior, like blaming a disorder.
Essential steps for recovery: reclaiming self, safety, and refusing to enable the abuser.
Narcissism versus empathy. A fundamental clash. Narcissists lack empathy. Empaths are highly sensitive. Makes empaths vulnerable to mental harm in these relationships.
That contrast often leads to a destructive dynamic where the empath's sensitivity gets exploited.
Key takeaways summarize this damaging dynamic. Protecting yourself involves remembering your value as separate, rebuilding self-esteem, and communicating by focusing on their benefits.
Practical strategies for dealing with narcissists are getting out safely.
Where do narcissistic traits come from? Upbringing, abuse, pampering, lack of real feedback, maybe too much superficial praise. Treatment usually involves therapy.
Understanding potential roots helps, and therapy can make a difference for those seeking change.
Narcissism summarized. Grandiose self-view, status-seeking, reacts badly to perceived slights.
Those three capture the core essence and drivers.
Self-care after manipulation. Affirm your worth, forgive yourself, invest in rebuilding confidence, define your values goals, find outlets like journaling, do things you enjoy, practice self-soothing, assess relationships objectively, no rose-colored glasses.
These are crucial for healing, rebuilding self-worth, and moving forward.
Codependency. Both need to change, often needs therapy because the controller might lack accountability.
Complex pattern usually requires professional help to break.
Mastering emotions continued. Pinpoint trigger emotions, modify trigger situations like your reaction to traffic, consciously change automatic responses, use strategies like changing surroundings or thoughts to influence feelings, deep muscle relaxation, manage negative emotions for well-being, find simple pleasures, have purpose, except it takes ongoing effort, especially after loss, self-soothe, take small risks to expand comfort zone, heal buried emotions, notice the impact of awareness, like the clenched fists example. It's a whole toolkit.
A rich set of strategies for gaining emotional awareness and control, leading to better coping and well-being.
The 4 keys of EQ again. Understand others' emotions, know your own, see the thought-emotion link, manage emotions effectively.
A great, concise framework for EQ skills.
Workplace communication and EQ. Vital skills,
Yeah.
verbal, nonverbal, digital. Key parts, empathy, I understand. Open-mindedness, listening. Nonverbals, eye contact, body language, tone. Do's and don'ts, be professional, don't yell.
Strong communication rooted in EQ is essential for positive and effective work relationships.
Building connections, social skills. Share similar experiences with empathy. Practice nonverbals, get feedback. That hunch about mismatches, often subconscious awareness.
Developing these skills helps build rapport and navigate interactions successfully.
Assertiveness, express needs respectfully. Speak openly, set boundaries, use I feel when you.
Vital for advocating for yourself while respecting others.
Cognitive diffusion. Treat negative thoughts as just thoughts, not facts. Reduces their power. Harsh self-criticism is a cycle needing external validation. Problem-centric thinking blocks action. Charlie buying a house.
Healthy relationship with thoughts is key. Don't let negativity paralyze you.
Positive self-talk. Affirmations consciously direct inner dialogue. Mindfulness, present moment acceptance. Channel thoughts positively redirect negativity into productivity.
These practices cultivate a more constructive inner state.
Empathy builds trust, leads to openness, stronger relationships, personal, professional. Understanding nonverbals is key for empathy. Practice perspective taking, like the opponent complaint exercise.
Empathy is the bedrock of connection, understanding, and cooperation.
Personality traits. Openness, low openness, prefer familiar, dislike ambiguity. Conscientiousness, impulse control, planning, linked to success, but maybe issues with high standards. Both environment and biology influence traits. Twin studies. High emotionality plus disagreeableness maybe makes personal problems others' problems.
Understanding personality dimensions offers insights into individual differences.
Difficult people. Perfectionists, crippling anxiety needs validation. Know-it-alls, control freaks often want to contribute. Verbally toxic, immature, attention-seeking. Managing them. Understand via questions. Stick to facts. Acknowledge emotions. Paraphrase. Keep it short. Involve others. Stay positive. Calm down after. Talk to allies. Mediators. Giving difficult feedback. Address the fear. Set maintain standards. Consequences.
Practical strategies for navigating these challenging dynamics.
Final thoughts on difficult situations. Knowing you did your best reduces stress. There are always options. Transparency can foster empathy. Principle of utilization. Adapt style. Speak plainly. No jargon. Escalate cautiously. Use kindness. Control what you can, your actions. Self-reflect on your part. Avoid should. Beginner's mind. No prejudgments. Validate feelings, don't just fix chunk problems. Active listening de-escalates. Take breaks. Explain errors politely. Focus on prevention.
A really comprehensive toolkit for handling tough interpersonal situations with more skill and less stress.
So wrapping this up, it feels like understanding influence, both light and dark, gives us really valuable insights into how we all interact.
Absolutely. Recognizing these psychological currents really illuminates a lot about our daily experiences, doesn't it?
And hopefully exploring these tactics, the dark triad, manipulation, persuasion, hopefully it empowers you listening to navigate things with more awareness, better self-protection.
Yeah, being attuned means you're better placed to make informed choices and look after your own well-being.
It's definitely a lot to take in, I know. But the core ideas, I think they offer some genuinely practical tools for personal growth, for healthier relationships.
They can be challenging concepts, for sure, but they provide useful ways to understand ourselves and others more deeply.
So maybe a final thought for you to chew on. Think about the influence tactics we talked about. Which ones have you seen? Maybe even used yourself without really thinking about it. What does recognizing that tell you about your past interactions? And how might it change how you connect with people going forward?
That's a great reflective question. Looking at your own experiences through this lens, it can bring real self-awareness and maybe lead to interacting more consciously, more intentionally.
Definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.